Celine ran through the shadowed forest, her bare feet brushing against fallen leaves. The moon hung low, silver and full, painting the trees in cold light. Every step was a mixture of fear and longing. Her heart pounded, not just from running, but from the sting of betrayal. Her mate had rejected her. The words still echoed in her mind, sharp and cruel. "You are not what I expected," he had said, his voice void of warmth. "I cannot be with you." She had begged, pleaded even, but nothing could change his mind. In her world, mates were chosen by fate, marked by destiny under the first full moon of the year. To be rejected was unthinkable, a wound that cut through the soul. And now, Celine felt broken, abandoned, and lost in the very forest that had once felt like home. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying voices she could barely understand. Some were real, some were shadows of memory, and some were something older, darker. She shivered, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless and wild, responding to the tension in the air. Ahead, the forest opened into a clearing. Moonlight spilled across the ground, illuminating flowers that glowed faintly in the darkness. Celine slowed, her senses alert. She had learned long ago that the forest was not merely trees and animals. It was alive. It watched, it judged, and it punished those who entered uninvited. A movement caught her eye, a flash of silver in the corner of her vision. She froze. Her wolf growled softly, a low rumble that vibrated through her chest. Then he appeared. Kale, the alpha, tall, broad-shouldered, and impossibly strong. Kale stepped from the shadows as if the darkness itself obeyed him. His eyes were sharp, golden, piercing, and they fixed on her as though he could see into the depths of her soul. There was a coldness there, a danger that made her heart race, and yet she could not look away. "You should not be here," he said, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "This forest is not safe for someone like you." "I can take care of myself," Celine said, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound firm. "I don't need your protection." Kale studied her for a long moment. He could see the fear, the anger, and the sorrow tangled together in her posture. Most would flee at his presence, most would bow or plead, but not Celine. There was something in her that refused to break completely, even now. "You are far from your pack," he said finally, "and far from your mate, who has chosen to abandon you." Her chest tightened. She hated that he knew, hated that he had spoken the truth. "I am not weak," she whispered, almost to herself. "I do not need anyone." Kyle's lips curved slightly, almost a smirk, though it did not reach his eyes. "We shall see," he said. Then, before she could respond, the ground beneath her trembled. From the shadows of the forest, shapes moved, dark, twisted figures that whispered in voices not meant for human ears, curses long forgotten, spirits of shifters lost in old wars, and creatures that fed on fear. They circled her, hungry, sensing the broken bond in her heart. Celine's wolf surged within her, claws and fangs ready, heart racing, but it was not enough. She had never faced such creatures alone. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, and for the first time in her life she felt small and powerless. Then Kale stepped forward. His presence was like fire and ice combined. The ground seemed to bow to him, the shadows retreating at his command. He raised his hands, and energy like silver flame danced across his skin. The spirits hissed and recoiled, disappearing into the trees with screams that sounded both ancient and human. Celine stumbled backward, watching him with a mixture of awe and fear. Who are you?" she asked. "I am Kale," he said simply, "Alpha of the Frostfang pack, and right now, you are mine." She blinked, confusion and defiance warring inside her. "Yours?" she repeated. "You don't even know me. I am not yours to claim." Kale's eyes softened slightly. Not warmth, exactly, but curiosity, interest, something that made her stomach twist. "Perhaps," he said, "but the forest does not forgive weakness, and neither do I. If you are to survive here, you will be under my protection, whether you like it or not." Celine felt a flicker of something unexpected. Hope? Safety? But it was tangled with fear and pride. She wanted to fight him, to resist, to prove that she did not need him. And yet, when she met his gaze, she felt the first stirrings of connection she could not explain. He did not offer comfort in words. There was no gentle hand or soothing tone. His claim was raw, like a force of nature, demanding recognition and respect. Celine's wolf snarled in defiance, but her human heart felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since her rejection, the possibility of belonging. Kyle led her through the forest, silent and watchful. Every step was measured, every motion deliberate. He did not speak unless necessary, yet his presence spoke volumes. It told her that danger could be kept at bay, that strength could protect her, and that the world was larger and darker than she had imagined. Hours passed as the moon traced its path across the sky. Celine's legs ached, but she barely noticed. Her mind was spinning with the shock of the night, the power of Kyle, and the strange pull she felt toward him. The forest was no longer simply a place of danger. It was alive with tension, desire, and secrets. At last, they reached a high ridge overlooking a hidden valley. In the center, Kyle's fortress rose from the earth like a living thing, walls carved from stone, towers spiraling into the night sky. It was formidable, cold, yet somehow inviting. "This will be your home for now," Kyle said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And your training will begin tomorrow. If you wish to survive, and perhaps grow into the mate you were meant to be, you will learn to follow. And to fight." Celine's chest tightened. Mate. That word, heavy with destiny and longing, made her heart ache. She wanted to resist, to flee, but she knew the forest would not allow it. And deep down, a part of her wondered, could she belong here, with him, even after all that had happened? As she watched Kale turn toward the fortress, Celine felt the stirrings of her wolf within her, restless, powerful, alive. She sensed the bond forming, slow and undeniable, between them. It was not yet love, not yet trust, but it was a connection that neither of them could deny. But as the night deepened, a shadow moved across the ridge behind them, a figure watching, waiting. A whisper of the past, a threat yet unseen, something that would test Celine and Kyle in ways neither of them were prepared for. Celine shivered, not from cold, but from the awareness that her journey had only just begun. The rejection she had suffered was not the end. It was the first step toward a destiny darker and more beautiful than she could imagine. And Kale, the alpha who claimed her, who held her in a grip of power and challenge, would either become her greatest protector or the force that broke her completely. As the moon reached its highest point, Celine's wolf howled into the night, a sound full of longing, anger, and hope. Somewhere deep in the forest, that howl was answered, not by her rejected mate, but by the alpha who had chosen her. The night whispered promises of power, danger, and connection. And somewhere in the shadows, the first threads of destiny began to weave themselves around Celine and Kyle, threads that neither could escape. To be continued. The first light of dawn crept over the mountains, painting the valley in pale gold. Celine woke on the cold stone floor of Kale's fortress, wrapped in a heavy blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. The night had been long, haunted by memories of rejection and the events in the forest. But she was alive, and that was more than she had expected. Kyle did not wake her. He moved silently through the fortress, checking the perimeter, his senses alert to every sound, every shadow. Selene had begun to notice small details about him. The way his golden eyes scanned the horizon, the way his jaw tightened when danger approached, the way his presence filled the room without a word. He was danger and safety intertwined, a force that neither begged nor explained. She rose, stretching and flexing her sore limbs. Her wolf stirred, sensing the day's trials ahead. Training. The word alone made her stomach tighten. She had never been under someone's strict guidance before, and Kale's claim over her life and survival was unyielding. Yet, she could not deny the pull she felt toward him. Her heart, though still cautious, beat faster when she imagined his gaze on her. Kyle appeared in the training hall, tall and imposing, sunlight catching the golden flecks in his eyes. He nodded at her, silent acknowledgement of her presence. "We begin," he said simply. The day was a mixture of physical endurance and mental challenges. Kale pushed her through obstacle courses, tests of agility, and lessons in sensing the forest's subtle shifts. He corrected her posture, guided her movements, and tested her focus. Selene's pride bristled at first. She had never been trained like this, and the constant scrutiny grated against her independence. Yet, as the hours passed, she began to understand the purpose behind Kale's intensity. He was not cruel. He was preparing her for the dangers that lurked beyond the fortress walls. The spirits of the forest had not vanished. Dark forces still roamed, seeking weakness, testing the bonds of pack and mate alike. Kyle's training was survival, but it was also connection. During a pause, Selene collapsed onto a bench, sweat running down her face. Kale sat across from her, silent, studying her. "You are stronger than you realize," he said finally, his voice calm but commanding. "But strength alone is not enough. You must trust your instincts, your senses, and yourself." "I am not your student," Selene replied, her voice sharp but trembling. "I do not belong here. You cannot claim me with words and expect obedience." Kyle leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I do not demand obedience," he said. "I demand survival. If you wish to live, if you wish to claim what is yours, you will listen. You will learn. And perhaps, in time, you will choose to accept more." Selene's wolf growled softly in her chest, restless and uneasy. The words "choose to accept" stirred something she had tried to suppress: curiosity, hope, and something darker: desire. She looked at Kale, truly looked at him, and for a moment she saw behind the mask of the alpha. She saw pain, loneliness, and the weight of responsibility. That night, Kale led her to the outer grounds of the fortress. The moon was high, blood red, casting an eerie glow over the trees and stones. He instructed her to focus on her senses, to listen, to feel the pull of the forest and the creatures that hid within it. "Your mate has abandoned you," Kale said quietly, his tone almost gentle. "But that does not mean your life is forfeit. You are stronger than the prophecy suggests. You have the power to claim your own fate." Selene's chest tightened. The word mate still cut like a blade, yet she could not deny the truth in his words. She had survived rejection, the forest, and the spirits that sought her destruction. Perhaps strength and choice mattered more than destiny alone. Hours passed as she practiced, moving through the shadows, sensing every leaf, every rustle, every whisper of wind. Kyle watched silently, his eyes never leaving her form. At first, Selene had been aware of his gaze, tense and guarded. Now she felt it like a presence at her back, steady and unwavering, a force she could rely on. When she finally stopped, exhausted but triumphant, Kale approached her. He extended a hand, not in command, but in invitation. "You have done well," he said, "but the true test is yet to come." Selene took his hand reluctantly, feeling the heat of his touch. Her wolf stirred, sensing a strange bond forming between them, raw and undeniable. She pulled back slightly, reminding herself that she did not belong to him, that she was her own. Yet, a part of her longed to stay in that moment, to feel the connection, the safety, and the power of his presence. The next days passed in a rhythm of training, hunting, and learning to listen to the forest. Celine began to notice changes within herself. Her senses sharpened, her reflexes grew quicker, and her confidence surged. But with each improvement, she also noticed something else. Her feelings toward Cale were changing. What had been awe and fear was evolving into curiosity, respect, and a reluctant admiration. Cale, too, struggled. His claim over Celine was not merely physical or territorial. It was a matter of heart and spirit. He had never felt such a pull toward another, such a mix of desire and admiration for strength and courage. And yet, his past haunted him. Loss, betrayal, and the weight of being alpha had taught him caution. To trust, to care, to love was a risk he had never taken. One evening, as the moon rose high and the stars shimmered like distant fires, Celine encountered her rejected mate in the forest. He had followed her trail, driven by envy and longing. His presence ignited a storm of emotions, anger, fear, and lingering pain. He demanded her return, claiming that destiny and prophecy still bound them. Kyle appeared at her side, silent and commanding. His presence alone sent a shiver through her rejected mate. "She is mine," Kyle said, his voice low and dangerous, "and you will leave or face consequences you cannot imagine." The tension crackled like lightning. Celine's wolf surged, protective and wild, standing beside Kyle. She realized something she had not allowed herself to admit before. She had begun to trust him, to rely on his strength, to feel a bond that went beyond fear and duty. The rejected mate, realizing he could not challenge Cale alone, vanished into the forest, leaving only a whisper of threat behind. Celine turned to Cale, her chest heaving, eyes wide with shock and relief. Why did you protect me?" she asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. Cale's gaze softened, though only slightly. "Because no one else could," he said, "and because you are not alone anymore. Not while I am here." The words settled over her like the first rays of dawn. They were not a promise of love, not yet, but they were a recognition of connection, trust, and power. Celine's wolf, restless and yearning, curled within her, sensing the bond deepening. But the night was not yet over. As they returned to the fortress, shadows flickered at the edges of the trees. The forest whispered, ancient and foreboding. A presence lingered, something dark, something old, something that had not yet revealed itself. It watched, waited, and learned. Celine shivered, leaning slightly into Cale's side. She had survived rejection, betrayal, and danger, but she knew that the true test of her strength, her heart, and her bond with Cale was only beginning. Cale, sensing her unease, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever comes," he said quietly, "we face it together." Celine's heart trembled at the words. Together. The concept was foreign, dangerous, and thrilling. She had always been alone, always been her own master. Yet, in this alpha's presence, she felt a spark of something she had long denied: trust, hope, and the faintest whisper of love. As the moon rose to its peak, a howl echoed from deep within the forest. It was not hers, and it was not Cale's. It was something older, darker, and more powerful than either of them had yet faced. Celine's wolf growled, tense and alert, while Cale's eyes narrowed, golden light flashing in the shadows. The forest waited, silent and watching. The bond between them had begun, strong and unyielding. But the challenges ahead promised fire, danger, and secrets that could either destroy them or bind them forever. Celine looked at Kyle, her pulse quickening. She was no longer the rejected mate wandering in despair. She was becoming something more, stronger, wiser, and perhaps ready to claim a destiny she had once thought lost. And Kale, the alpha who had claimed her, who had saved her, who had challenged her and awakened something she had never felt before. He knew that the coming trials would test not only their strength, but their hearts. The forest whispered, the shadows stirred, and the bond between the alpha and the mate-in-waiting deepened. Fierce and undeniable, to be continued. The forest was silent, too silent, as though the world itself held its breath. Celine stood at the edge of the ridge, the fortress far behind her, the valley stretching below bathed in silver moonlight. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless and alert, sensing the presence that had shadowed them for days. The dark force they had felt, ancient, patient, and cruel, was finally making itself known. Kyle appeared beside her without a sound, his golden eyes scanning the trees. "It has come," he said softly, a rare note of gravity in his voice. "We face it together, Celine. No more running, no more hiding." Celine nodded, the weight of the last days pressing against her shoulders. She had grown stronger, faster, wiser. Training, survival, trust. And the bond forming with Kyle had shaped her into someone who could face the darkness. Yet, fear pulsed in her veins. The rejected mate had disappeared, but Celine knew he had allied with forces beyond her understanding. They would come, and they would try to take her away. The first strike came without warning. Shadows erupted from the forest, twisting and writhing, forming shapes both human and animal, both real and imagined. The creatures surged toward them, whispering curses older than memory. Kyle moved like a storm, fluid and unstoppable. His hands glowed with silver fire as he struck down the shadows, his strength and skill unmatched. Selena ran beside him, her wolf heightened, senses sharper than ever. She could feel the rhythm of the forest, the pulse of the ground, the heartbeat of the wind. Every movement became instinct. Every breath precise. They fought as one, alpha and mate-in-waiting, two halves of a whole. Kale's presence gave her courage, his strength gave her confidence, and together they pushed back the dark tide. But it was not enough. The creatures were endless, and Celine realized that the threat was not just physical, it was a test of will, of bond, of heart. A figure emerged from the shadows. Celine's chest tightened, her breath catching. It was him, the rejected mate. His eyes glowed with envy and malice, and he wielded power that was dark and unnatural. "You belong to me," he hissed, his voice echoing with the whispers of the forest spirits he had bound to his side. "You always have." Celine felt a surge of anger, pain, and resolve. She would no longer be the rejected one, the powerless pawn of destiny. She turned to Kale, meeting his gaze. His eyes held a promise of protection, of strength, of the bond that neither prophecy nor curse could break. "You are mine," Kyle said, his voice low and unwavering. "And she chooses me." The rejected mate snarled, advancing with dark energy crackling around him. Celine stepped forward, her own power responding to the bond with Kyle. Her wolf surged within her, claws and fangs ready, instincts sharp, heart racing with courage. She would fight. She would claim her life. She would claim Kyle. The battle erupted. Shadows and curses clashed with silver fire and raw instinct. Kyle and Celine moved in perfect harmony, protecting each other, striking with precision, their connection a force neither enemy nor darkness could undo. Every glance, every movement, every shared breath deepened the bond between them. Celine's strength had grown beyond her own expectations. She remembered Kale's words, "Trust your instincts, trust yourself, trust the bond." And now, in the heat of battle, she understood. She was not a pawn. She was a warrior, a mate, a force to be reckoned with. The rejected mate lunged, trying to separate them, trying to claim Celine by force. Kale intercepted, their bodies colliding in a clash of raw power. Celine leaped, using her wolf's speed and reflexes, striking the mate with a force born of rage and justice. Shadows recoiled, the forest itself trembling as the three powers collided. Finally, Celine and Kale combined their strength, channeling the bond they had nurtured over days of training, trust, and survival. Silver light exploded from them, burning away darkness, shattering the shadowed figures, and forcing the rejected mate to his knees. The forest fell silent once more, the air heavy with smoke and magic. Selena's chest heaved, her wolf growling softly in satisfaction. Kyle stepped beside her, eyes softening as he looked at her. "You are more than I imagined," he said, his voice filled with rare warmth. "You are strong, brave, and you are mine, not by destiny alone, but by choice." Tears filled Celine's eyes, not from fear but from relief and recognition. She had been rejected, abandoned, and tested, yet she had survived. She had claimed her strength, her power, and her right to choose. And now, with Kale at her side, she felt a connection that was deeper than any prophecy, stronger than any curse. The rejected mate, broken and defeated, vanished into the forest, leaving only whispers of threats that no longer held power over her. Celine realized that the past no longer controlled her. She had reclaimed her life, her heart, and her destiny. Kyle reached for her hand, his fingers warm and steady. "Come with me," he said, his voice gentle, commanding, and filled with something unspoken. "This is only the beginning, Celine. Together, we will face whatever comes." Celine took his hand, feeling the bond pulse between them like fire and ice. She nodded, a small smile breaking across her face. "Together," she whispered, her voice firm and certain. As they walked back to the fortress, the first rays of dawn broke across the mountains, painting the valley in light and shadow. The forest seemed to breathe, acknowledging the balance restored, the bond formed, and the love that had begun to bloom. Celine felt a sense of peace she had never known. She had survived rejection, faced darkness, and discovered strength within herself she had never imagined. And she had discovered Kale, not just as her alpha, her protector, or her teacher, but as someone who could challenge her, protect her, and awaken feelings she had never allowed herself to feel. Night gave way to day, yet the story was far from over. Shadows still lingered at the edges of the forest, whispers of old curses and forgotten powers. But Celine no longer feared them. She knew that with Kyle by her side, they could face anything. As the sun climbed higher, Celine and Kyle stood on the ridge, looking out over the valley that had once seemed so threatening. Now it was a place of possibility, of power, and of choice. The bond between them was no longer tentative. It was forged in survival, trust, and respect. Celine turned to Kyle, her wolf quiet but alert within her. "I never thought I could feel safe again," she said softly. "But with you, I feel more than that. I feel home." Kale's eyes softened, his golden gaze warm against the rising sun. "Home is not a place," he said. "Celine, home is where you are accepted, where you are strong, and where you are loved. You are home with me." For a moment they simply stood together, hands clasped, hearts beating in unison. The bond between them was no longer one of prophecy or power alone. It was choice. It was courage. And it was the beginning of something neither of them had expected, but both had longed for. Yet even in that moment of peace, the forest whispered. Deep in the shadows, ancient eyes watched, waiting for a chance. But for now, Celine and Kale were united, strong and ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together, their bond unbroken, their hearts unyielding. The rejected mate's threat had been silenced, the darkness pushed back, and a new chapter began. Celine's past no longer defined her. She was not the rejected mate. She was the chosen, not by fate alone, but by courage, choice, and love. As the wind rustled through the trees and the sun's rays lit the fortress walls, Celine realized the truth of Cale's words. Home was not a place. It was the bond they had forged in fire and shadow. It was the strength they had discovered in each other. And it was the beginning of a story that would echo through the forest, through the mountains, and through time. Celine and Cale turned back toward the fortress, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they were unbreakable. Together, they were more than mate and alpha. They were partners, warriors, and something that neither prophecy nor darkness could ever take away. And somewhere in the forest, a new presence stirred, curious, watching, waiting. But for Celine and Cale, the first battle was won, the bond was sealed, and their hearts were aligned. The future was uncertain, the shadows still whispered, but the fire between them burned bright, and that fire would never be extinguished.